You wouldn't last 30 seconds here. The water around your ankles feels warm, almost inviting, deceptive, like stepping into a bathtub that someone forgot to mention has piranhas in it. Except these aren't piranhas. They're something much, much worse. Something moves beneath the surface. The deliberate displacement of water by something the size of a school bus. Your scientific name would be Homo sapiens, which in this place roughly translates to afternoon snack. The air hangs thick with humidity and the smell of rotting vegetation. Flies the size of hummingbirds buzz past your head with wings that sound like tiny helicopters. Everything here is oversized, overarmed, and thoroughly over your ability to survive it. You can feel your heart rate picking up just thinking about it, can't you? That's your modern brain trying to process a world where humans would rank somewhere below plankton on the food chain. A world where the apex predators didn't just rule land or sea, but every drop of water, every patch of mud, every shadow cast by the massive ferns overhead. This isn't your typical science video, it's designed to help you unwind. Let your mind drift into the deep currents of Earth's most terrifying chapter. While you're settling in, relaxing, letting go of the day, you'll be absorbing something remarkable. You'll experience what it feels like to stand in a place where evolution went completely insane and created monsters that make modern crocodiles look like house cats. So settle in, get comfortable, and let your curiosity carry you to a river system that stretched across an entire continent. A place where being the biggest, strongest predator on the planet still wasn't enough to guarantee you'd see tomorrow. And let me know in the comments, what fascinates you most about prehistoric predators? Are you drawn to their sheer size, or does something about their hunting strategies keep you awake at night? Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you'd like, maybe grab something warm to drink, and let's wade into waters that once ran red with the blood of giants. The year is 100 million BCE. There's no Sahara Desert stretching endlessly across North Africa. No sand dunes baking under a merciless sun. Just water. Rivers wider than modern highways, swamps deeper than city blocks, and wetlands that seem to stretch beyond the horizon like a green, breathing ocean. You're standing in what geologists call the Kem Kem Beds, though that name makes it sound far more civilized than it actually was. Think of it as nature's equivalent of a maximum security prison, where all the inmates are armed, hungry, and roughly the size of freight trains. The landscape shifts constantly. Seasonal floods turn forests into lakes overnight, lakes into rushing torrents by morning. Nothing stays the same for long, which means everything living here has to be adaptable, aggressive, or dead, usually dead. Your feet sink slightly into mud that's been churned by creatures whose footprints could serve as swimming pools. The soil beneath is rich with nutrients washed down from highlands that no longer exist, creating a buffet that feeds plants, which feed herbivores, which feed the most spectacular collection of apex predators Earth has ever assembled in one place. This isn't your regular day swamp. It's a biological arms race frozen in time where evolution kept hitting the make it bigger and more dangerous button until it broke the machine. The climate here runs about 15 degrees warmer than modern North Africa, turning the entire region into a greenhouse that breeds giants the way Petri dishes breed bacteria. Imagine trying to navigate this place. Every step forward reveals new threats, new challenges, new ways the environment wants to kill you. The water you need to drink might contain something that could bite you in half. The shade you seek might be cast by a predator waiting to drop on your head. Even the fish here have learned to hunt dinosaurs. The air itself tells a story of violence. It carries the sounds of creatures that dwarf anything in our modern world. Splashes that echo like thunder, roars that vibrate through your chest cavity, the wet, tearing sound of something massive being dragged underwater. Probably still alive, definitely not happy about it, This is a place where being at the top of the food chain requires constant vigilance, overwhelming firepower, and a willingness to fight for every meal, where the difference between predator and prey can change based on who gets hungry first, where the only rule that matters is the one carved into every creature's DNA: adapt, dominate, or become someone else's dinner. You wouldn't last 30 seconds here. But the creatures that called this place home didn't just survive, they thrived. They grew to sizes that shouldn't be possible, developed hunting strategies that border on genius, and created an ecosystem so perfectly balanced in its violence that it sustained itself for millions of years. Welcome to the most dangerous place in Earth's history. Population. Approximately everyone wants to eat everyone else. Survival rate for tourists. 0%. Likelihood you'll want to learn more about the monsters who ruled this watery hell. 100% guaranteed. The question isn't whether you'd survive here. The question is which of the apex predators would get to you first. And trust me, they're all very, very good at what they do. Meet your first nightmare, Spinosaurus aegyptiacus. The scientific name sounds almost elegant until you realise it translates roughly to Egyptian spine lizard that will absolutely ruin your day. At 50 feet long, it's bigger than most city buses, heavier than a fully loaded garbage truck and equipped with a sail on its back that makes it look like a dragon. Someone forgot to give wings. You're crouched behind a fallen tree trunk, watching the river bend where the current slows and deepens. The water looks calm, peaceful even, like a postcard from Hell's Vacation Resort. Then the surface breaks, with the slow, deliberate emergence of something that shouldn't exist. First comes the snout, longer than a canoe and lined with teeth that curve backward like meat hooks. Then the skull, massive and crocodilian, designed by evolution specifically to grab things and never let go. The sail follows, cutting through the water like a ship's mast made of bone and flesh. Spinosaurus moves through water the way sharks move through dreams, silent and inevitable. Its bones are dense, almost solid, acting like a biological diving belt that lets it walk along river bottoms where prey animals come to drink. Think of it as a 50-foot-long crocodile that learned to swim properly and developed a taste for anything stupid enough to get wet. The creature's forelimbs end in claws that could open a car like a can opener. Its hind legs, powerful enough to propel 15 tons of predator through rushing water, leave footprints in the riverbank mud that could serve as hot tubs. Everything about this animal screams apex predator, except it doesn't need to scream. The silence is much more terrifying. Watch how it hunts. A herd of Urannosaurus approaches the water's edge, their duck-like bills perfect for filtering plants from shallow water. They're cautious, as herbivores in this ecosystem have learned to be. They scan the surface, listen for unusual sounds, even test the water temperature with their feet. None of it matters. Spinosaurus doesn't attack from the surface like a crocodile. It attacks from below, rising from depths that seem impossible for something so massive. By the time the Urannosaurus realise what's happening, 6 tons of muscle and bone are already airborne, jaws opened wide enough to swallow a small car. The impact sends water exploding in all directions. The lucky Urannosaurus run. The unlucky one disappears beneath the surface in a swirl of red-tinted foam, dragged down by an animal that can hold its breath longer than you can hold your attention span. But what makes Spinosaurus truly terrifying? It's not just big, it's intelligent. Recent studies suggest it could problem-solve, plan ambushes, even coordinate with others of its species. Imagine a great white shark with the cognitive abilities of a dolphin and the size of a sperm whale. Now give it legs and a really bad attitude. The sail on its back serves multiple purposes, none of them comforting to potential prey. Temperature regulation, display to rivals. possibly even a solar panel to help power this biological killing machine. Some scientists think it might have been brightly coloured, turning this apex predator into a 50-foot advertisement for why you should never, ever go swimming in Cretaceous rivers. You can almost feel the water temperature drop when one of these creatures enters the system. Fish flee to deeper waters. Crocodiles, themselves the size of school buses, suddenly develop an interest in terrestrial hunting. Even other apex predators give Spinosaurus a wide berth, because starting a fight with something that can drown you is generally considered poor life planning. The fossil evidence tells a story of an animal so perfectly adapted to its environment that it dominated North African waterways for millions of years. Bite marks on other predators' bones suggest Spinosaurus didn't just hunt prey, it actively challenged anything that might compete for resources. This wasn't a scavenger or an opportunistic feeder. This was a calculated, methodical killer that treated rivers like its personal hunting preserve. Standing here, watching this monster patrol its territory, you begin to understand why this ecosystem was so dangerous. It's not enough that the water contains death. The death is smart, patient, and big enough to make modern great whites look like goldfish. The really unsettling part: Spinosaurus was just one of several apex predators calling this place home, and they didn't all stick to the water. Just when you thought the water couldn't get any more terrifying, meet the creature that made Spinosaurus nervous. Deinosuchus ryograndensis. The name means terrible crocodile, which shows a refreshing honesty in scientific naming. At 35 feet long and weighing as much as a city bus, this is what happens when evolution decides regular crocodiles aren't quite murderous enough and hits the upgrade button repeatedly. You're standing knee-deep in a backwater channel, surrounded by cypress-like trees whose roots disappear into murky water. The surface is still as glass, broken only by the occasional bubble rising from decomposing vegetation below. Everything about this scene whispers safe, shallow water. Everything about this scene is lying. Deinosuchus doesn't announce its presence the way Spinosaurus does. One moment you're alone in what looks like a peaceful lagoon. The next moment, 35 feet of prehistoric nightmare is erupting from what you thought was a floating log. The skull alone is 6 feet long, armed with teeth the size of railroad spikes. The bite force measures somewhere around 18,000 pounds per square inch, which means it could crush a small car without working particularly hard. For comparison, a great white shark bites with about 4,000 pounds per square inch. A Tyrannosaurus rex managed about 12,800. Deinosuchus didn't just bite harder than anything else in its ecosystem, it bit harder than almost anything that ever lived. Watch how this monster hunts. A young hadrosaur, maybe 20 feet long and weighing as much as an elephant, approaches the water's edge. It's being careful, scanning for threats, using all the survival instincts millions of years of evolution have given it. Those instincts are about to prove completely inadequate. Deinosuchus lies motionless in 3 feet of water, looking exactly like a fallen tree covered in algae. Its eyes, positioned on top of its skull like periscopes, track the hadrosaur's movement. Its brain, surprisingly sophisticated for a crocodilian, calculates distance, timing, and the exact moment when dinner will be close enough to grab. The attack happens faster than your brain can process. 35 feet of muscle and bone launches itself halfway out of the water, jaws opening to reveal a mouth that could swallow a motorcycle. The hadrosaur doesn't even have time to register surprise before 5 tons of apex predator crashes down on top of it. Then comes the death roll. Deinosuchus locks its jaws around its prey and begins spinning, using its massive body weight and muscular tail to create a whirlpool of violence. The water turns red almost instantly. Bones crack like gunshots. The hadrosaur, built to outrun land predators, has no defense against being torn apart by a living blender the size of a city bus. And the disturbing reality. This isn't even a big meal for Deinosuchus. Fossil evidence shows bite marks from these creatures on dinosaurs, twice the size of the hadrosaur we just watched disappear. They hunted everything from fish to flying reptiles, and they did it with the patient efficiency of a predator that knew it was the deadliest thing in the water. Deinosuchus could hold its breath for over an hour, lying motionless on the bottom of rivers and swamps, waiting for something edible to come within striking distance. Its sensory system could detect vibrations in the water from hundreds of yards away, turning every splash, every footstep, every heartbeat into a dinner bell. The truly terrifying part about sharing this ecosystem with Deinosuchus isn't just its size or bite force, it's the intelligence. These creatures could learn, adapt, and remember. They mapped their territories, identified regular prey patterns, and positioned themselves with the strategic thinking of a military commander planning an ambush. Even other apex predators treated Deinosuchus with respect. Spinosaurus, despite being larger, typically avoided areas where these crocodilian monsters were known to hunt. When something scares a 50-foot river dragon, you know you're dealing with a creature that redefined the concept of dangerous. Standing here, watching the last bubbles rise from where that hadrosaur disappeared, you realise something unsettling. In this ecosystem, even being bigger and stronger doesn't guarantee survival. Sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one you never see coming. And Deinosuchus was very, very good at not being seen until it was far too late. The water isn't the only place where death walks on legs the size of tree trunks. Carcharodontosaurus saharicus. The name means shark-toothed lizard, which sounds almost quaint until you see one up close and realise why paleontologists sometimes wake up in cold sweats. At 45 feet long and weighing 8 tons, this is what happens when nature decides T-Rex needs some serious competition and creates something even more terrifying. You're crouched in tall ferns watching a clearing where several streams converge into a muddy delta. The air shimmers with heat and humidity, thick enough to taste. Insects buzz with the lazy persistence of creatures that know they're too small to be worth eating by anything truly dangerous. They're wrong, but we'll get to that. Then the ground starts to vibrate, the rhythmic pounding of something massive walking with purpose. Each footstep leaves a print 3 feet long and deep enough to collect rainwater. The sound carries through the forest like a biological earthquake, announcing the arrival of Africa's answer to every nightmare you've ever had about being hunted. Carcharodontosaurus emerges from the tree line like a moving mountain made of muscle and teeth. Its skull, nearly 6 feet long, houses a brain sophisticated enough for complex problem solving and jaws powerful enough to bite through steel. The teeth that give it its name curve backward like sabres, each one designed to slice through flesh and bone with surgical precision. This is a biological killing machine that evolved specifically to hunt other apex predators. Watch how it moves. Despite weighing as much as a loaded garbage truck, Carcharodontosaurus walks with the fluid grace of a creature that spent millions of years perfecting the art of not being heard until it wants to be. Its legs, built like organic pistons, can propel 8 tons of predator at speeds that would make a modern rhinoceros jealous. The clearing ahead holds a small herd of Egyptosaurus, long-necked sauropods the size of school buses. They're feeding peacefully, their heads moving in slow sweeps as they strip vegetation from trees. Their size makes them look safe, invincible even. That illusion is about to be shattered by 45 feet of evolutionary fury. Carcharodontosaurus saharicus doesn't charge blindly like you might expect from something so massive. It stalks. The creature uses the terrain, moving through shadows cast by giant ferns, timing its approach with the wind patterns that will carry its scent away from potential prey. This is a predator that understands strategy, patience, and the value of surprise. The attack comes like a thunderbolt made of flesh and bone. Carcharodontosaurus saharicus explodes from cover, covering the distance to the nearest Egyptosaurus in seconds that stretch like hours. Its jaws open wide enough to swallow a compact car, revealing rows of teeth that could section a tree trunk. The impact when it hits is like watching a freight train collide with a building. The Egyptosaurus, despite being twice the weight of its attacker, goes down like it was made of cardboard. Those shark-like teeth sink deep into the neck, finding arteries with the precision of a surgeon and the enthusiasm of a serial killer. Blood sprays in arterial fountains that paint the surrounding vegetation crimson. But here's what makes Carcharodontosaurus saharicus truly terrifying. It doesn't just hunt herbivores. Fossil evidence suggests these creatures actively fought each other and occasionally tangled with Spinosaurus over territory and resources. Imagine two apex predators, each the size of a city bus, deciding to settle their differences with teeth and claws in what amounts to a kaiju battle fought in prehistoric swampland. The bite marks on recovered fossils tell stories of violence that border on the incomprehensible. Gouges in vertebrae where teeth scraped bone. Healed injuries that suggest some of these creatures survived encounters that should have been fatal. Scars that map out territorial disputes fought between animals that redefine the concept of dangerous. Standing here, watching this biological nightmare tear apart prey that dwarfs modern elephants, you begin to understand the true horror of this ecosystem. It's not enough that the water contains monsters. The land belongs to creatures that make the water monsters look reasonable by comparison. Carcharodontosaurus saharicus didn't just rule the terrestrial food chain, it actively reshaped it, forcing every other creature in the ecosystem to evolve faster, fight harder, or find new and creative ways to avoid becoming lunch. This wasn't adaptation, it was an arms race where the prize for losing was extinction. The really unsettling part, even Carcharodontosaurus saharicus had to watch its back in this place, because the skies above held terrors that made land-based apex predators look up nervously and wonder what was casting those impossibly large shadows. Just when you thought you'd catalogued all the ways this ecosystem could kill you, the supporting cast arrives to prove you weren't thinking nearly big enough. Sarcosuchus imperator. The name means flesh crocodile emperor, which is the kind of scientific honesty that makes you wonder if paleontologists enjoy giving people nightmares. At 40 feet long and weighing 12 tons, this is what Deinosuchus might grow up to become if it really applied itself to the business of being terrifying. You're standing on what looks like a safe riverbank, watching the water flow past with deceptive calm. The current carries floating vegetation, the occasional dead fish, and what you initially mistake for a floating log. That mistake is about to become very educational in the worst possible way. The log has eyes. Sarcosuchus doesn't hunt like modern crocodiles. Modern crocodiles are patient, strategic, efficient. Sarcosuchus hunts like a force of nature that developed a personal grudge against everything that breathes. Its skull alone is 6 feet of bone and teeth, powered by jaw muscles that could crush a car engine. The rest of its body is 40 feet of muscular destruction wrapped in armor plating that could stop rifle bullets. But Sarcosuchus isn't even the strangest thing in these waters. Meet Onchopristis, a sawfish the size of a school bus, whose saw is lined with teeth that could section a telephone pole. This isn't a gentle filter feeder that accidentally got too big. This is an active predator that hunts dinosaurs from below, using its weaponized snout to slash and dismember prey that ventures too close to the water's edge. Then there's Morsonia, a coelacanth that grew to the size of a great white shark and developed a taste for anything it could fit in its mouth, which, given its dimensions, included most small dinosaurs, several species of flying reptiles, and probably the occasional careless sarcosuchus. The water itself becomes a three-dimensional battlefield where predators hunt each other in layers. Sarcosuchus patrols the shallows and riverbanks. Onchopristis works the middle depths, using its saw to create confusion and injury before moving in for the kill. Morsonia lurks in the deepest channels, rising from the darkness like a living nightmare to engulf anything unlucky enough to be swimming overhead. Even the smaller predators in this aquatic hell show a creativity and violence that borders on artistic. Chemchemia auditore, a spinosaurid the size of a delivery truck, specialised in fishing, but wasn't above supplementing its diet with flying reptiles, small dinosaurs, and anything else that made the mistake of getting wet. Watch what happens when a pterosaur, something the size of a small airplane, swoops down to snatch a fish from the surface. The water explodes as three different predators launch simultaneous attacks. Sarcosuchus erupts from the shallows, jaws opened wide enough to swallow the pterosaur whole. Onchopristis attacks from below, its saw slicing through the water like a medieval weapon. Morsonia rises from the depths, moving with the terrible inevitability of a biological torpedo. The pterosaur, despite having wings and the advantage of flight, disappears in a fountain of spray and violence that turns the water red for 50 yards in every direction. Within seconds, there's nothing left but a few floating feathers and the satisfied sounds of apex predators dividing up an unexpected meal. This is an ecosystem where even the fish have learned to hunt dinosaurs, where every drop of water contains something that views you as potential food, where evolution's response to how can we make this more dangerous was always hold my beer and watch this. The fossil record from this period reads like a catalogue of biological warfare. Bite marks on bones from creatures that should have been too big to kill, healed injuries that suggest some prey animals survived encounters that defied logic, tooth marks in fossils from predators attacking other predators, creating a food web so complex and violent that modern ecosystems look like gentle meadows by comparison. Standing here, watching the water churn with the movement of creatures that shouldn't exist, you realise the true horror of this place. It's not just that every individual predator is terrifying, it's that they're all competing with each other, pushing each other to become more efficient, more violent, more creative in their methods of turning living things into lunch. And they're about to get company from above. Look up. That shadow passing overhead isn't a cloud. It's something with a wingspan wider than a fighter jet and a beak that could spear a small car. Welcome to the airspace above hell, where even the sky belongs to predators that make eagles look like hummingbirds. Quetzalcoatlus Northropi. The name honours an Aztec god of wind and death, which tells you everything you need to know about how paleontologists felt when they realised what they'd discovered. With a wingspan of 36 feet and standing as tall as a giraffe, this is what happens when evolution decides birds aren't quite terrifying enough and needs to try harder. You're standing in that same clearing, watching Carcharodontosaurus finish its meal, when the temperature drops suddenly, not from clouds, but from something massive blocking out the sun. The shadow moves with purpose, circling like a living eclipse, and you realise that even apex predators occasionally need to look up and worry. Quetzalcoatlus doesn't soar gracefully like modern birds, it hunts. Those enormous wings powered by flight muscles that could bench press a compact car can carry this aerial nightmare at speeds approaching 60 miles per hour. The beak, longer than a canoe and sharp as a spear, can punch through armour plating that would stop a rifle bullet. Watch how it hunts. A group of smaller dinosaurs, each about the size of a large dog, are feeding near the water's edge. They're being cautious, scanning for terrestrial and aquatic threats, using every survival instinct millions of years of evolution have given them. They forgot to look up, Quetzalcoatlus folds its wings and drops like a guided missile made of bone and fury. The impact when it hits the ground sends smaller creatures scattering in every direction. The beak, driven by 36 feet of wingspan and muscles built for powered flight, punches through its target like a biological piledriver. But here's what makes these aerial predators truly nightmarish. They're not scavengers picking at leftovers. They're active hunters that coordinate attacks, use terrain to their advantage, and occasionally work together to bring down prey too large for a single pterosaur to handle. The fossil record shows bite marks from these creatures on dinosaurs that should have been too big to kill. Parallel gouges in bone that suggest multiple pterosaurs attacking simultaneously, using their beaks like spears in a coordinated assault that would make military strategists jealous. Even more disturbing, Quetzalcoatlus was smart enough to steal kills from terrestrial predators. Imagine spending hours tracking and killing a massive herbivore, only to have something the size of a small airplane drop from the sky, and decide your dinner looks tasty. The bite force in that beak could crush bones that Carcharodontosaurus struggled with. Other pterosaurs fill different nightmare niches in this aerial ecosystem. Anhanguera, with a wingspan of 13 feet and teeth like curved daggers, specialised in fishing but wasn't above snatching small dinosaurs from riverbanks. Ornithochirus, even larger, could pluck prey from the water's surface without landing, turning feeding into a precise aerial manoeuvre that combined hunting with acrobatics. The skies above this prehistoric hell were as dangerous as the water and land below. Flying meant exposure to predators that could overtake you, outmaneuver you, and spear you from above with surgical precision. Even creatures capable of flight found themselves looking over their shoulders, or in this case, above their heads. Standing here, craning your neck to track that massive shadow as it circles overhead, you realise the true genius of this ecosystem's design. Every possible escape route has been claimed by something perfectly evolved to kill you. The water belongs to crocodilians the size of buses. The land is ruled by predators that make modern lions look like house cats. And the sky is patrolled by flying nightmares, with beaks like biological spears. There is literally nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, nowhere safe to exist in a world where evolution's answer to every survival strategy was to create something bigger, faster, and more creative at turning living things into food. Even the herbivores, the supposedly gentle plant eaters, were about to discover that in this ecosystem, being prey meant developing survival strategies that bordered on the paranoid. Being a herbivore in this ecosystem was like playing hide and seek with death. Where death had friends, death could fly, and death was very, very good at seeking. Nigersaurus taketi. The name sounds almost elegant until you see one and realise this is what happens when evolution decides regular plant-eating strategies aren't quite paranoid enough for survival in prehistoric hell. With a mouth containing over 500 tiny teeth arranged in batteries designed for rapid vegetation processing, this is a biological lawnmower that spent every waking moment convinced something was about to eat it. You're watching a small herd of these creatures feeding in what looks like a peaceful meadow beside a quiet stream. They move with the nervous efficiency of animals that know they're basically walking hamburgers in an ecosystem full of very large, very hungry predators with excellent taste in meat. Every few seconds, at least one Nigersaurus lifts its head to scan for threats. With the desperate intensity of a creature that understands its position in the food chain and really, really doesn't like it. Their necks swivel constantly, heads turning in mechanical sweeps that would make radar operators jealous. This constant vigilance isn't paranoia, it's mathematics. In an ecosystem where apex predators outnumber prey species, being relaxed for even a few seconds can be fatal. These herbivores have evolved behaviours that border on neurotic, because the neurotic ones are the ones that survived long enough to reproduce. Watch what happens when a twig snaps in the nearby forest. 50 tons of herbivore flesh instantly transforms into a stampede that could flatten a small building. They don't investigate the noise. They don't pause to determine if it's actually dangerous. They run first and ask questions later, because in this place, the creatures that stopped to ask questions became dinner. But running isn't always an option when the threats come from multiple directions simultaneously. Ouranosaurus nigeriensis, with its distinctive sail and duck-like bill, has developed a different survival strategy. These creatures form defensive circles when threatened, presenting a wall of horns and claws to potential predators. It works reasonably well against single attackers. Against coordinated assaults from multiple apex predators, it becomes a convenient way to package lunch. The really heartbreaking part is watching these herbivores try to drink water. They approach the river's edge like soldiers entering a minefield, testing each step, scanning constantly for movement beneath the surface. Some designate sentries while others drink, creating a rotation system that ensures someone is always watching for the inevitable attack from below. Even their feeding strategies reflect the constant threat of death. Egyptosaurus, massive sauropods the size of city buses, feed with their heads held high, scanning the horizon between bites. Their long necks, evolved for reaching vegetation, double as early warning systems that can spot approaching predators from hundreds of yards away. The young are the most vulnerable, and their survival strategies border on the desperate. Baby dinosaurs stay hidden in dense vegetation, motionless for hours at a time, while their parents forage nearby. The slightest movement, the smallest sound could attract attention from predators that view juvenile herbivores as convenient snack foods. Fossil evidence tells the story of an ongoing arms race between predator and prey that pushed both sides to evolutionary extremes. Herbivore bones show healed bite marks from encounters with apex predators, suggesting some of these creatures survived attacks that should have been fatal. Predator teeth embedded in herbivore vertebrae tell stories of desperate struggles where dinner fought back with surprising effectiveness. The herbivores develop backup plans for their backup plans. Some species evolve the ability to swim, using rivers as escape routes despite the aquatic predators lurking beneath the surface. Others developed running speeds that would make modern racehorses jealous, turning flight into an art form that combined speed with terrain navigation. But perhaps the most disturbing adaptation was social. These herbivores learned to recognize the alarm calls of other species, creating an interspecies communication network that turned the entire ecosystem into a biological early warning system. When one creature detected danger, the alert rippled through the entire community like a prehistoric air raid siren. Standing here, watching these massive creatures jump at shadows and scan constantly for threats that could emerge from land, water, or air, you begin to understand the true psychological horror of this ecosystem. It's not just that death could come at any moment, it's that every creature knew death could come at any moment, and that knowledge shaped every behaviour, every decision, every moment of their lives. Even feeding, the most basic biological necessity, became a calculated risk where the penalty for miscalculation was being torn apart by creatures that had spent millions of years perfecting the art of turning herbivores into lunch. These weren't just prey animals, they were survivors of an ecosystem so dangerous that simply staying alive required constant vigilance, split-second decision-making, and the kind of paranoid awareness that would exhaust a modern human within hours. And they were about to face something even worse than individual predators, an ecosystem collapse that would make their daily struggle for survival look like a gentle warm-up exercise. The question is, how did this ecosystem manage to sustain this level of violence for millions of years without collapsing under the weight of its own murderous efficiency? And the answer lies in something paleontologists call the resource abundance paradox. When you flood an ecosystem with nutrients, you don't just get more life, You get bigger life, hungrier life, and more creative ways for that life to kill each other. It's like pouring rocket fuel on a campfire and wondering why everything suddenly got so much more. You're standing on a rise overlooking the vast river system that made this biological arms race possible. The water carries nutrients from highlands that stretch beyond the horizon, creating a soup rich enough to support plant life that grows like it's been injected with steroids. Those plants feed herbivores the size of city buses. Those herbivores feed predators that redefined the concept of dangerous. But here's where the math gets interesting. In modern ecosystems, apex predators make up less than 1% of the total biomass. They're rare, because being at the top of the food chain requires enormous amounts of energy and territory. In the Kem Kem ecosystem, apex predators made up nearly 10% of the total biomass, which should be mathematically impossible. The secret was water. Constant, nutrient-rich, life-giving water that created a biological conveyor belt of food production. The seasonal flooding didn't just bring nutrients, it redistributed them across thousands of square miles, creating temporary lakes that exploded with life before draining back into the main river systems. This constant cycle meant that prey animals had access to near unlimited food resources, which allowed them to grow larger and reproduce faster than their predators could eliminate them, which allowed the predators to grow larger and develop more sophisticated hunting strategies, which pushed the prey to evolve better defenses, which forced the predators to become even more creative. The result was an evolutionary arms race that ran on biological rocket fuel for millions of years. Watch how the system balanced itself. Spinosaurus controlled the deep water channels, using its semi-aquatic adaptations to hunt in areas where other predators couldn't compete. Deinosuchus dominated the shallows and riverbanks, ambushing anything stupid enough to get wet. Carcharodontosaurus ruled the terrestrial territories, using pack hunting strategies to bring down prey too large for individual predators. Even their feeding strategies were designed to minimize direct competition. Spinosaurus primarily hunted fish and aquatic prey. Carcharodontosaurus focused on large terrestrial herbivores. Deinosuchus was opportunistic, taking whatever came within striking distance. The pterosaurs filled aerial niches that terrestrial predators couldn't access. But the really brilliant part was the scavenging hierarchy. When one apex predator made a kill, others would arrive to claim shares based on a complex social structure that prevented most direct confrontations. Think of it as a biological organized crime family where everyone gets a piece of the action, but nobody wants to start a war that could destabilize the entire system. The climate played its part too. Temperatures 15 degrees warmer than modern North Africa meant that cold-blooded predators could maintain higher activity levels year-round. No seasonal slowdowns, no periods of metabolic dormancy. The hunting season lasted 12 months a year, every year for millions of years. This created selective pressure that forced rapid evolution on both predators and prey. Creatures that couldn't adapt quickly enough didn't just lose reproductive advantages, they became extinct within a few generations. The ecosystem was effectively running evolutionary experiments at accelerated speeds, creating new survival strategies faster than biologists can catalogue them today. The result was biological specialization that bordered on the artistic. Every ecological niche was filled by something perfectly adapted to kill in that specific environment. Shallow water had different predators than deep water. Dense forests had different hunters than open plains. Even the air was divided into hunting territories based on altitude and prey preferences. Standing here, watching this biological machine operate with clockwork precision, you realize that this wasn't chaos, this was order. Violent, terrifying, absolutely lethal order that sustained itself through perfect balance between abundance and annihilation. Every predator had enough food to survive, but not enough territory to avoid competition entirely. Every prey species had sufficient resources to maintain populations, but not enough safety to become complacent. The system maintained itself through controlled violence that kept every species sharp, aggressive, and perfectly adapted to their role in this prehistoric theatre of death. The truly unsettling part is how stable this arrangement was. Fossil evidence suggests the basic ecosystem structure remained unchanged for over 10 million years. 10 million years of apex predators the size of city buses, hunting herbivores, the size of buildings in an environment that treated violence as a fundamental organizing principle. This was evolution operating at peak efficiency, creating an ecosystem so perfectly balanced in its lethality that it could sustain itself longer than human civilization has existed. But even the most perfectly designed killing machine has vulnerabilities, and this one was about to encounter a force more destructive than all its apex predators combined: time itself. The end came slowly, then all at once. Climate change arrived like a geological assassin, methodical and patient and absolutely merciless in its efficiency. The gradual strangulation of the water systems that had sustained this biological arms race for millions of years. You're standing in that same clearing, but something feels different. The air carries less moisture. The sounds of water seem more distant. The river that once thundered past with the power of a liquid highway has diminished to something that whispers instead of roars. The highland regions that fed this vast river system were shifting, uplifting, changing the drainage patterns that had remained stable for geological ages. The seasonal floods that redistributed nutrients across thousands of square miles became irregular, then infrequent, then memories preserved only in the DNA of creatures whose survival strategies were suddenly obsolete. Watch what happens when the water recedes. Spinosaurus, perfectly adapted for semi-aquatic hunting, finds itself stranded in an increasingly terrestrial world. Those dense bones that made it such an effective underwater predator become liabilities in an environment where buoyancy no longer matters. The specialized adaptations that made it the ultimate river predator make it clumsy and inefficient on dry land. Deinosuchus faces an even worse fate. As the water systems contract, territorial boundaries that once prevented direct competition disappear overnight. Multiple apex predators find themselves competing for shrinking resources in areas that can no longer support their massive energy requirements. The careful balance that sustained this ecosystem for millions of years collapses like a biological house of cards. The herbivores, despite their constant vigilance and paranoid survival strategies, discover that all their adaptations for avoiding predators mean nothing when the plants they depend on simply stop growing. The nutrient-rich wetlands that supported vegetation capable of feeding creatures the size of buildings transform into arid landscapes that can barely sustain shrubs. Carcharodontosaurus, the ultimate terrestrial predator, finds itself in the position of being perfectly adapted for an environment that no longer exists. The prey, herds that once numbered in the thousands, dwindle to scattered individuals. The pack hunting strategies that made it so effective become impossible when there aren't enough targets to justify the energy expenditure. Even the pterosaurs, with their ability to travel vast distances in search of food, discover that mobility means nothing when there's nowhere to go. The thermal updrafts generated by large bodies of water disappear. The fish populations that supported aerial predators collapse as rivers turn to streams. Streams turn to seasonal flows, and seasonal flows turn to dust. The truly heartbreaking part isn't the death of individual creatures. It's watching an entire ecosystem's worth of evolutionary innovations become obsolete overnight in geological terms. Millions of years of biological arms races, survival strategies, and predator-prey relationships vanish like they never existed. Fossil evidence from this period tells a story of rapid population collapse followed by extinction events that swept across multiple species simultaneously. The same nutrient-rich sediments that preserve this ecosystem's golden age also record its death throes, creating a geological obituary for the most dangerous place in Earth's history. Standing here, watching the last remnants of water disappear into muddy pools that reflect a dying sun, you realise that this ecosystem didn't fail because its predators weren't strong enough or its prey weren't clever enough. It failed because even the most perfectly balanced biological machine is helpless against changes in the fundamental conditions that created it. In the end, the most dangerous place in Earth's history was defeated by something as quiet and patient as evaporation. The water dried up, the monsters followed, and Earth moved on to write new chapters in the long story of life, death, and the endless competition between creatures trying to eat each other and creatures trying not to be eaten. The fossil remains scattered across North African desert floors tell a story that should keep modern humans awake at night, but probably won't. We've gotten very good at pretending we're different from the creatures that came before us. You're standing in the Sahara Desert, holding a piece of Spinosaurus vertebrae that's been baking in the sun for 100 million years. The bone feels surprisingly heavy, dense with the mineral deposits that replaced living tissue long before humans learned to make fire. This fragment once belonged to a creature that ruled river systems wider than the Amazon, in an ecosystem more dangerous than anything in our modern world. But here's the uncomfortable truth. We're not as far removed from this prehistoric nightmare as we'd like to believe. The Nile River system, flowing through modern Egypt, carries echoes of the ancient Kem Kem rivers. The seasonal flooding that once sustained monsters now sustains human civilizations, but the basic principles remain unchanged. Abundant water creates abundant life, which creates competition, which creates innovation, which sometimes creates monsters. Modern crocodiles in the Nile grow to lengths that would make medieval knights reconsider their career choices. Bull sharks swim hundreds of miles upriver, hunting in fresh water with the casual efficiency of creatures that never forgot how to kill. Hippos kill more humans in Africa than lions, leopards and crocodiles combined, using bite forces that could crush a small car. The Amazon basin tells an even more familiar story. River systems that stretch across continents, supporting biodiversity that borders on the impossible, creating predator-prey relationships that push evolution to its creative limits. Anacondas the size of telephone poles, caimans that hunt jaguars, piranhas that strip cattle to bone in minutes, electric eels that generate enough voltage to stop a human heart. These are our neighbours, operating according to the same biological principles that created the most dangerous place in Earth's history. Even the Congo River system, flowing through Central Africa like a liquid highway of biodiversity, supports creatures that remind us how thin the line is between civilization and the kind of natural selection that turns rivers red. Goliath tigerfish with teeth like razors. Crocodiles that view humans as convenient protein packages. Fish that grow to sizes that shouldn't be possible in freshwater environments. The patterns repeat because the mathematics of predator-prey relationships haven't changed. Abundant resources create large populations. Large populations support apex predators. Apex predators drive evolutionary arms races. Arms races create monsters. The fossil record suggests this has happened before and will happen again. The Devonian seas produced fish the size of city buses, with jaws that could section whales. The Permian period created predators so efficient they nearly sterilized the planet. The Jurassic Ocean supported marine reptiles that made modern great whites look like minnows. Each time the pattern is the same: stable climate plus abundant resources plus evolutionary pressure equals biological arms races that push predators and prey to sizes and strategies that seem impossible until you see the fossil evidence. Standing here, watching the sun set over sand dunes that cover the bones of creatures that once ruled the world, you realise that Earth is very good at creating monsters, given the right conditions, the right resources, and enough time. This planet can produce predators that redefine the concepts of dangerous and deadly. The most dangerous place in Earth's history is gone, but the forces that created it are still here, still working, still pushing the boundaries of what's possible when life decides to get creative about the business of survival. Sleep well tonight, knowing that somewhere in the world, apex predators are hunting in water systems that echo with the same biological rhythms that once sustained monsters the size of city buses. The monsters may be smaller now, but they're still monsters. They're still hunting, and they're still very, very good at what they do. The water may have dried up, but the hunger never dies.